Hi. This question is for Dr. Fuhrman. You talk a lot about cruciferous vegetables and how beneficial it is for us. What about people who have thyroid issues? I read somewhere that if you have thyroid issues, you should cook it a little bit. Is that true? Can you speak about that?
Sure, and that's a good question because we were just discussing that before we came up, and Brenda and I both have a lot of things to say about that. But the first thing to recognize is that this idea that cruciferous vegetables are a goitrogen that are going to hurt your thyroid is a myth, mostly a myth. It doesn't happen that way. The consumption of cruciferous vegetables are linked to thyroid health, protection against thyroid tumors, and protection against thyroid cancer. They're protective for your thyroid. Now, the cruciferous vegetables do, in animals, and if consumed in very, very high amounts, can interfere with iodine uptake and can lower thyroid production of thyroid hormone. But in humans, that could only occur if you were iodine deficient in combination with having an unusual amount of cruciferous vegetables, probably juice to get enough poundage you would need to have any clinical effects. In real life, they have no clinical effect on thyroid function other than beneficial effects. So this idea that people are trying to make you fearful of eating cruciferous vegetables because they're going to have a negative effect on the thyroid is not true. It is advisable to make sure your diet is iodine sufficient. That's important. But you don't have to cook cruciferous vegetables unless you were drinking tons of cruciferous juice that was with poundage of the stuff each day. It would be very difficult to have a negative effect on thyroid function.
Thank you.
Let Brenda.
Yeah, and I would add that there are goitrogens in all sorts of foods. There are goitrogens in, the cyanogenic glycosides in flax seeds. There are goitrogens in sweet potatoes and soy foods, and all sorts of foods have goitrogens. Goitrogens really, as Dr. Fuhrman said, are only an issue if you are iodine deficient. And this is an issue for a lot of people because, first of all, there are some places, especially in Europe, where the iodine in the soil is quite poor. A lot of people are using, different Himalayan sea salts and different salts that are actually quite low in iodine. And if you're not consuming various seaweeds and things like that, and you don't use iodized salt, where's your iodine coming from? And so some people, it would be reasonable for them to be including some iodine in a supplement form. And 150 micrograms a day is what is recommended. There's some caution about seaweeds because seaweeds can actually contain massive amounts of iodine, and certain seaweeds can get you over the top. The upper limit for iodine is 1,100 micrograms. So basically you're looking at, for 150, 1/16 of a teaspoon of kelp powder. So they're very, very tiny amounts. But it is important that people ensure that they've got a sufficient iodine. If you have sufficient iodine, the goitrogens are much less of an issue. But all that having been said, you do destroy some of the goitrogens when you cook cruciferous vegetables. So it's, I think those are the main things.
Thank you.
Don't worry about it.
And flax seeds as well. The cyanogenic glycosides are destroyed by cooking. And a couple of, tablespoons or so it'll contribute a fair bit of these compounds. But again, just make sure you get an iodine source.
Thank you. One last question, if that's okay, regarding quinoa. I've read it's a grain and I've read it's a seed. What is it and how much of it should we have?
Yeah, it's not a traditional grain. It's what we call a pseudo grain. And so it's a seed, we have some other pseudo grains. Buckwheat is a pseudo grain, amaranth is a pseudo grain. And these foods they tend to actually be somewhat more nutrient dense than some of the true grains, but not always consistently. They tend to be a little bit higher in protein, a little bit higher quality or complement of amino acids or essential amino acids. and sometimes a little more concentrated in trace minerals as well. And to me, the amount of grains and pseudo grains, we can lump them together in a sense because they all are fairly high unrefined carbohydrate foods. And my personal perspective on grains and starchy vegetables and all of these really concentrated carbohydrate foods is meet your needs for the other food groups. So you've got your 10 or 12 servings of veggies and fruits and your servings of nuts and seeds and legumes. And once you have all of those and you're getting enough of all of those things, then grains and starchy vegetables, you eat the amount to provide the necessary calories for you. So if you're a senior woman who's eating 1,600 calories a day, you need very few of those foods. If you're an athlete burning 5,000 calories a day, you need quite a few of those foods. And so I think that's how you vary it. And so for the average person, probably 3 or 4 servings a day is plenty. And you don't actually need to have any if your diet is really well designed and you're eating. I think there are a lot of reasons to choose, say, a sweet potato over a grain food simply because of the nutrient density and some of the phytochemicals and so forth. But I do think grains can be a healthy part of the diet, and I'll talk about tomorrow in my presentation. I believe that even within the whole grain category, there's a hierarchy. And at the top of the hierarchy, and this is where most of our grains, if we're eating grains, should be coming, intact whole grains. That means the grain as it's picked off the plant, nothing added, nothing removed. And the very best way to eat that would be sprouted, because you increase the phytochemicals 300, 400, 500% by sprouting it. And when you cut the grain, when you roll the grain, when you shred the grain, when you grind the grain to make flour, when you flake the grain, and when you puff the grain, as you go down this hierarchy, you're doing more and more damage to the grain. And as you go down, you tend to eat these foods with things added. And so the very best, I would say, draw the black line in the sand at rolled grains and stay above that, if at all possible.
Thank you.
And it increases the glycemic effect as you grind it into flour and grind it into pastry flour. The more it's processed, the more it's ground, the more the glycemic effect goes up, of course.
Let me just ask a clarifying question on that.
That's why a lot of these books that are anti-grain books, their science is sloppy, because they don't distinguish between how the grain was prepared. They're just putting a study that showed that the grain was bad, and they're looking at refined grains that were ground into flour, and they didn't really study the intact grain that was used whole and cooked in water and something. So they're really not, they're sloppy science. They're not, so it's important what you said.
Yes, and the other thing that's interesting is you can grind a grain, you're increasing the surface area with these processing techniques. And as you increase the surface area, the rate of absorption increases. But that's not the only thing that increases the rate of absorption. The other thing is when you lighten the grain. So if you yeast the bread, if you puff the grain, this stuff just dissolves in our system. So if you compare, for example, white bread or brown bread with the glycemic index with table sugar, the glycemic index is actually higher than table sugar because it just breaks down so rapidly because it's puffy, but it's also because sugar is half glucose, half fructose, and the bread is mostly glucose, and so there's a difference in glycemic index because of that. It gets a little bit complicated, but just to know when you lighten things. Another example is if you compare white pasta with white bread, the white pasta has a much lower glycemic index because it's broken down more slowly, even though it's made of flour, and they're both made of flour. So that density really affects how quickly your body breaks it down.
Just to clarify, this afternoon, Dr. Fuhrman, you mentioned 5 foods: greens, seeds, beans, mushrooms, and onions as wonderful foods that you recommended. If someone took these non-glutinous grains, such as quinoa, millet, amaranth, teff, buckwheat, wild rice, they soaked them or sprouted them, then they cooked them. After soaking them, sprouting them, and cooked them, how would you compare that then to like a bean? Is the bean clearly a higher nutritional food than these 6 non-glutinous grains that have been soaked and sprouted and then cooked?
Well, look, you're mentioning things that are soaked and sprouted and then cooked, so I mean, they're all okay foods and they're all legitimately healthy foods to eat, unprocessed whole plant foods. And how you cook them makes a difference. Whether you cook it lightly in a wok with vegetable juice or water, or whether you over-steamed it and sucked all the nutrients out in the water and threw it away, how long you put it, what heat you cooked it under, whether you cooked it with oil. I mean, all these things are very dependent on the way you cook it. So, but what I'm suggesting is that we have to eat enough of these. Brenda already said it. We have to eat enough of those really high nutrient foods to supply our immune system what it needs, and then some of those foods that maybe have a little lower nutrient density, you don't have to not eat them. You just try to eat them in the best form possible, conservatively cooked or raw, and so they fill in your calories. And also, there's nothing wrong with a person who's more physically active and burning more calories, or an athlete, to eat more nuts and seeds too, to eat, to increase your calories. I have a lot of professional world-class athletes that are certainly they're eating, squashes and turnips and rutabaga and other root vegetables for calories, but they're eating a tremendous amount of nuts and seeds and a lot of beans, and they're carrying around blenders with them to international events because they do this for their athletic performance. I'll tell you why. They're making the green smoothies and making these superfoods with them, is because they recognize that if they get sick in their travel on airplanes, meeting thousands of people, if they get ill and they're out of commission with a virus even, it could ruin their whole career for the year, because their whole career is dependent on staying well and continuing to train and continuing to compete in these events that are not going to hold the event when it's convenient for them. If you're a professional ski racer, you've got to go into these events, 8 weeks in a row, and you've got to be available for those 8 weeks of event, or you're going to hold, or your score for the year is going to go down, and you're not going to get the 500,000 from the guys who make the Rossignol skis or whatever. So the point is they want to stay well so they can keep active in training. And right now, and next month is one of these powerlifting champions, and some of these powerlifters are getting their body fat down, getting their weight down to compete at a lower body weight, and they're able to perform and do tremendous feats of strength, using some of these techniques of improving the nutritional quality of their diet. So yes, so I'm saying that we maximize our health by being aware, by getting nutritional variety and high nutritional density.
And I'll just add a couple of things to that. Number one, when you soak a seed and when you sprout a seed, a few things happen. And so the soaking process, a seed is really a little package that eventually would turn into a plant. And so in that seed are stored forms of nutrients. And also there are things we sometimes call anti-nutrients that protect the seed from prematurely releasing those nutrients. When we soak the seed, we're giving a signal to the seed to reduce the anti-nutrients and release the stored forms of nutrients. And so when, like you were saying, soaking and sprouting and then cooking, you're actually reducing things like the phytates and the lectins and so forth in foods. And then you're also making some changes in the nutrients. So for example, an interesting thing happens with amino acid. Lysine, one of the more limited amino acids, tends to actually increase. Omega-3 fatty acids increase. So all of these changes begin to occur that are all good. And so it's a wonderful thing to soak and sprout. I soak and sprout all my nuts and seeds, or soak and dehydrate, to help reduce anti-nutrients, increase nutrients, and make the food much more digestible. So it's a wonderful thing to do whenever you can, if you have time. And the second point that I would make is just adding on to what Dr. Fuhrman said about the way that you prepare foods. One of the things to know is that when you cook foods with a wet cooking method, so you're steaming or you're making soup or stew or something like that, you produce far fewer of the products of oxidation that are formed when you use dry cooking methods. So for example, if you steam a yam versus baking the yam versus barbecuing, whenever you brown, you've heard of various reactions like the Maillard reaction where you're browning foods, or you're blackening foods. When you brown or blacken, and especially when fat is involved as well, you produce products of oxidation like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. And in starchy foods or grains, you produce something called acrylamide. So if you bake a potato, you'll produce more acrylamide than if you boil a potato. If you fry the potato, you'll produce even more acrylamide. So, and also advanced glycation end products. If you're frying, you're producing aldehydes like acrolein and these kinds of compounds that are really very damaging to human health. They increase oxidative stress. And so these are not to say, I mean, I even barbecue foods in the summertime when I'm having company over sometimes, but I'm careful to use a very low temperature to try not to blacken foods and not to use it as my major way of cooking foods. For those of you that cook foods, I know that many of you eat, like I do, a more high raw diet. But when you do cook, just to be aware of that, you're better off making soups and stews than doing the dry cooking so much.
Yeah, I agree 100% with what was just said, and so I just want to reiterate, so you can write this down, that it's better to boil sweet potatoes, not bake them in the oven. It's better to cook them in water, and then if you put them cold in your refrigerator, it increases the resistant starch even more after they were boiled, excuse me. Now it's better to wok foods. If you want to lightly cook some vegetables, wok them in a little with water or vegetable broth. And if you're steaming them, I don't know about you guys, but for me, if I steam a food, the phone rings, my kid calls me, I'm thinking about something, I come back and I ruin it every time. It's mush, the water is green, dark green, and I've lost all the nutrients in the food. So I've known from experience, I got to set my timer on it. If I'm going to steam something, I got to steam it for a very short amount of time. So I specifically time things to steam them, 8 to 12 minutes, maybe a food, and never more than 12 minutes. So if I'm steaming like maybe broccoli, it might be 12 minutes, but kale or something lighter is only going to be 8 or 9 minutes. So I'm going to actually put my timer on to not to overly steam it once the water starts boiling, because the minute the water's dark green, you've lost so much nutrients. Yeah, and then with artichokes, I cut the artichoke in half, and I scoop, because you have to, for the artichoke to get soft, it has to otherwise steam for like 40 minutes. So I cut it in half. I remove the choke by cutting it along where the fuzz is, and I remove that center choke part. And so it's cut in half, and then I put it in the pot, and I got it timed, so once the water's boiling, to just steam it for 18 minutes. That's the only food I steam longer. And I love artichokes. I eat tons of artichokes. But they're a superfood too, and they're actually a food that retains a lot of its nutrients when steamed, and that doesn't drop a lot of it into the water either, so you can steam it a little longer, and it's ready when you can separate the leaf from the choke. But what I'm saying is you even shouldn't steam an artichoke that long, because if you don't cut it open, you actually steam it so long that part of it gets overcooked. The same thing with broccoli. If you don't cut the broccoli stem down the middle and maybe split it and quarter it, the florets get cooked, but the stem gets hard, and you got to overcook the florets for the stem, so it's better to separate it, take the stem and make it thinner, and then time it and only steam it for 10 minutes. Or better yet, wok it in a little water so it's still demi-cooked. You know what I mean? How a little bit just gently cooked, but there's still a lot of raw on the inside. You want to add something?
Yeah, I'll just add another thing to that is what I often do is I just boil water, and I pour the boiling water on the greens if I want to, slightly cook them, or the broccoli, and then I leave it for maybe a minute at most, and off it goes. And I find for greens, it's just such a good, if you're wanting to do a wilted green salad or something like that, it's just almost instant. You just have to put a bit of boiling water on it. And it's the same with grains. One of the ways that I cook grains is, for example, oat groats. I would boil them for 5 minutes, shut the heat off, and I come back an hour later and they're done. So, and it's the same with rice. You can do that with almost any grain, where you just boiling it for a couple of minutes and then turning the heat off, and it'll take care of itself.
And I was just going to say a lot of, I advocate people to eat a lot of raw vegetables and raw green vegetables. A lot of the way I do that is I take, cabbage or kale or collards or some green, and I just put it make a little salad in a bowl, and I take my soup, my bean, mushroom, carrot juice, whatever soup, and I take the hot soup and I just pour it right onto the greens, and I have the raw greens with the hot soup on top, and it kind of like softens them. It's like in between raw and cooked and makes it a little bit easier to chew. And that's another good option for people, to mix the chili and the stews with the raw greens. Just pour it right on top as it's like a salad dressing.
Hello, it's really a privilege to be here. Couple of questions. Levothyroxine, I was told it's a chemotherapy drug, is that right?
No, you're just taking steroid medication.
Levothyroxine,
Yeah.
okay. Another question.
Levothyroxine.
For thyroid, levothyroxine. For hypothyroidism.
Yes, it replaces the hormone your body is supposed to make. They're replacing because you have hypothyroidism.
Yes. Another question. I was diagnosed 5 years ago with stage 3 breast cancer. And I'm still here. I was given 1 to 5 years to live. And I decided I wasn't going to be doing any invasive procedures.
I hope you took the 5 years.
I took the 5 years. I took the 5 years.
Well, so forget that. I'm going to take 10.
I'm going to take 25. Anyhow, I went on the raw food diet for a few months, for a year. I lost 46 pounds. I gained it back and more because I didn't continue, which I'm leaving here tonight with. I'm leaving this conference with a new outlook. I'm from Canada, Ontario, and I'm going to make this worth my while coming here. Also, I'm not a doctor. I work as a social worker. But something puzzled. I'm always puzzled when I go to my doctor and for tests and blood tests. And he's always saying, it's so good, your blood test is good. And I'm thinking that if I have stage 3 breast cancer as I was diagnosed, should something not be in my blood to say something not right with my blood? But he's always saying, that's good, that's good, that's good. What's your take on that? My blood came back every time the test came back. Oh, it's good, this is good, this is good. At one point, he told me my B12 was too high because I was eating bitter apricot kernels, which produce B17, I was told. So he said my B12 was too high. It was too high, too high. So I'm kind of puzzled because you want to do this and you want to do the other, but you're left sometime at a crossroad.
Well, I mean, you're asking somewhat difficult questions, but in any case, blood tests are highly overrated. They don't show the whole picture of your health. Mm-hmm. They just show electrolytes, liver function, kidney function, some nutrients. They're really not able to detect whether you're healthy or not. Just because you have a normal blood test doesn't mean you're healthy. And even if you have normal cholesterol, it doesn't mean you're healthy either. These tests are almost meaningless.
Well, that is good. He told me I could read my cholesterol.
What I'm saying to you is that a physician can better look at your body weight, your blood pressure, the diet you're eating, your exercise tolerance. There's much better ways to determine your health than just looking at a blood test, but you have to look at the constellation of factors involved. And yes, it's true that an early sign of an occult cancer, a cancer that's not yet manifested itself, might be a high B12 level. So a B12 level, let's say above 1,000, can be a sign of cancer. And it could be a sign that somebody should clean up their act because it might be predictive of cancer that maybe will happen down the road. And it's not really caused by taking too much B12 or taking too little B12. It's caused by just having your own body's cells become, there's some early signs of something going wrong in body cells, and your body releases a lot into B12 into circulation.
And on that note, I have never had a hypertension. My sugar is always 5.4 or what have you. I've never been sick. I'm 60 years old. I've never been hospitalized until I was given birth 35 years ago.
Well, I hope by being here at this conference and by learning what you are learning, that you could change the course of your life right now into a better direction and really get in great health. Because obviously, you have a lot of ways to go to be able to protect your precious life and to be able to have a good and happy life moving forward. So the more so take charge of your health, do everything you can, and that's also feels like you're doing something to control your destiny and not just sitting there letting things happen to you, but you're taking charge of doing things to your life, which can give you much more of better feeling about your, moving forward with life and enjoying life more.
Living with a new outlook.
Yes, a new positive outlook.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for all this. There are some groups around the country who are beginning to want to police themselves by setting up guidelines for raw food. And of course, the highest density that I've learned is that it's about 18 degrees. Yet some folks are saying, there's still tremendously high enzymes at 250, 300. Can you address that and what you might define as raw food?
Well, I know that depending on what group you're talking to, some say 105, some say 112, some say 118. And I would say, what is it you're trying to accomplish with, setting that kind of a number? And a lot of people would say the preservation of enzymes. And so why are enzymes so important? What is it that makes enzymes of value to human health? And I've looked at this in some detail, and I have to say, when you cook a food, first of all, you don't go from 100% to zero as soon as you drop food into water. There's a very gradual destruction of enzymes. So even if you hit, say, 130 degrees, you'll still have some activity, myrosinase or alanase activity. It's a gradual thing, not a sudden thing. So why are enzymes important? And I'll tell you I'm a registered dietitian, schooled in the standard way. And what we learned in school about enzymes is that enzymes are made of proteins, so they're completely digested in the stomach. They are of absolutely zero value to human health. That's what we learned. So when I began this Becoming Raw project, I decided that I would do the very best job I could do to figure out what was true and what was not true about enzymes. And I took some of the quotes from the leading people in the raw food movement, where they were quoting people like Michael Gardner and Stephen Rothman, some of the world's leading researchers on enzymes, mainstream researchers, scientific researchers that are published in peer-reviewed journals. And I contacted these researchers, and I provided them with the quotes. And the answers were really consistent. Well, I'm sure these people are well-meaning. They don't understand enzymes at all, or the scientific literature. And so what I did learn about enzymes is that there are two ways that enzymes can be of some benefit. Number one, at least from what I understand, number one is there are enzymes that are, and Dr. Fuhrman has talked about this, there are enzymes that are responsible for converting certain phytochemicals into their bioactive metabolites. So, for example, myrosinase changes the, glucosinolates into isothiocyanates like sulforaphane. That's really important because these active metabolites are what induce things like our phase 2 enzyme systems, which help us to get rid of carcinogens, turn them into water-soluble compounds, and excrete them from the body. So this is really important. They help to change, alan into allicin, the active form, through the enzyme alanase. And so we want to preserve these enzymes. And I'm sure we'll learn about many more of these enzymes. We don't know about all of them yet. We know about myrosinase, we know about alanase, and there's this, just a person without any sort of looking at it scientifically, I know, you know, when you drink a juice that's fresh squeezed versus a juice that's been pasteurized or processed in some way, it feels different in your body somehow. And we know there's something going on there. And the reality is this is a very young science, and there's a lot we don't know, and we have to admit that. The other thing about enzymes, and I think this is maybe overstated in the raw food world, is that they may have, help a little bit with digestion. And what we know is that in the upper part of the stomach, food is held for some time, for usually probably 20 to 60 minutes, on average 40 minutes. And in that upper part of the stomach, the pH there is very conducive to enzymes working. And so there will be some helping of breakdown of foods at that level. Once it drops down into the more acidic part of the stomach, those enzymes are completely destroyed, they're proteins, and they get broken down into amino acids unless they're packaged in a viable microorganism. So if those enzymes are packaged in some sort of organism from a fermented food or a cultured food, they may survive into the small intestine and continue to assist with digestion at that point. However, if you look at the total amount of enzymes, the volume of enzymes in plant foods versus the enzymes that the human body produces, there is a huge discrepancy. I mean, we produce far more enzymes in the human body, and that is really the largest chunk of digesting foods comes from what the human body provides. And so I think that in terms of overall digestion, it's probably a fairly small contribution from enzymes in foods. Beyond that, there may be other things that enzymes do and may have the potential to do that we have no idea about yet. So to me, just for the very reason of the conversion of phytochemicals into their active forms, it makes a lot of sense to be consuming raw foods, and the temperatures. We know that even upwards of 120, 130, there will still be some enzymes there, but 118 seems to be a very safe number in my view.
So I think as a conclusion, I think it's pretty clear that we're both in agreement that we recommend a lot of raw foods, but neither of us think it necessary to eat a 100% raw food diet. That is we don't see that's being beneficial to people's health or longevity to eat enough that you can't eat anything cooked. That's just being needlessly restrictive for no reason. That doesn't mean that we wouldn't certainly do not recommend a diet that's predominantly cooked either. The things that you cook should be conservatively cooked, and we talked about that already with water cooking and not causing damage to the food and so on. But some foods are better utilized raw cooked, and there's no reason to getting the best of both worlds.
I wanted to ask a question about a disease that wasn't on the list, but it does say, and more. It just says you're going to talk about this, and more. So now my question is about something that's in the category of and more. Okay. I'd like to ask about...
I've not heard of that disease.
Well, you will. I want to ask about what you could recommend, what's the most important thing to do if somebody has epilepsy?
Great question. Well, the problem is it's not one clear disease. There's lots of different types, and there's different, all different results you see. Like from my years in practice, I've had people who were young people and children and teenagers that have seizure disorders and epilepsy and treated them nutritionally and worked with them on doing all the right balance of nutrients in their body and trying to get them healthy, and they grew out of it and they stopped. And what I helped them with? Did the excellent nutrition help them grow out of it and stop having seizures? I think it did, but I don't know that there are a lot of controlled trials on that. I know that, though, as a person has more brain damage, in certain diseases, there's some diseases of the brain that the brain can be significantly damaged. There can be a seizure disorder that could be irreversible. So I think, in other words, the broad spectrum of causes of epilepsy, and probably it's that some causes may be reversible and other types of causes may be irreversible due to the limitations of the brain to rebuild itself once there's certain cell destruction. So with any disease, I hate to say to people that there's not an opportunity or chance for them to make improvement or get well, because you never know what the body can do in some cases, but we can't expect it to happen across the board to give predictable results. Maybe you want to say something.
Well, this is definitely not my area of expertise, but what I do want to share with you is just a little story of a client that I work with in Australia, and his son, 2 years old, had just an awful time with epilepsy and several seizures a day. It was really, he was very, very concerned. And sometimes I think in certain cases, sensitivity or serious allergy can contribute. And in this case, this child saw 5 pediatric neurologists, I believe, and just medication was all they were doing. And eventually, this family decided to, and it's a little bit of a story, but eliminate gluten. And the seizures, the epilepsy completely disappeared. Completely, it was gone. And not that it will work in every single case, but for this child, he had celiac disease, and it was undiagnosed. And so, removing the gluten did the trick. So it's just something to be aware of as a possibility for some individuals. But other than that, I don't know that much about it.
There's always unusual cases, and I've had a person who seized whenever they ate yogurt. They seized, but the more you take those irritating foods out of a diet that are immunostimulation, or the more toxic the diet is, the more likely you're going to hit something that's going to stimulate the brain negatively, and hopefully you'll help a person before their disease is too advanced or has a significant component of brain damage to it.
Okay, thank you.
May I make a comment? In 1973, it's really related to the woman who was confused and perplexed about her blood test. In 1973, the blood testing was changed. And when people used to wake up to find out if they were iodine deficient, they would simply do the gold standard basal body temperature test. But because you couldn't make any money off of that, because you have to get dressed, raise the metabolism, and go to the doctor's office, they had to figure out another way to control the patient. So what they came up with was blood tests. They don't even measure the iodine in the blood or the urine, and they have grossly low micrograms per liter for even measurements, which Dr. Gabriel Cousens is definitely a pioneer in the fact that 95 to 98% of the people on the planet are iodine deficient. Well, when they look at the blood and they see T4 in the blood, they're like, oh, you're fine. In 1900, if you're overweight, they gave you 100 milligrams of iodine a day for being overweight, and our RDA is insultingly 150 micrograms. Well, when you look at the blood and you say, oh, your T4 is fine based on, no, the adrenals made it. The adrenals make backup hormone. This is the biggest mystery in medicine, I feel, on the planet. Thank you.
Well, all I could say is there's lots of theories out there, and they're just theories, and we have to be somewhat skeptical of we have to have a degree of skepticism, because there's a lot of old claims being made in the alternative medicine field, and most of them are unsupported, and but some of them may true to be helpful, and some of them can be helpful for individual people. So, and I think the use of those kind of techniques should be limited to those that are getting or can't get help any other way. And we have the basics, and I think you've learned the basics this week of what you need to take care of your health. And you have to always keep in mind that too little of certain nutrients can be harmful, and too much of any nutrients can be harmful too. And too much water can be poisonous. And if you breathe too much and take in too much oxygen, that could be poisonous too. And too much iodine is definitely a poison and can have harmful effects, and we have to take that with a grain of salt because people can be hurt by excessive amounts of iodine as well. So that's a comment or a question, but I just can't let it go unchallenged.
I won't say anything. I mean, I agree. I think that we know that we have an upper limit for iodine for a reason, and there can be consequences and very adverse effects of very high intakes as well.
What are your thoughts about osteoarthritis as far as reversing that? I mean, you see, like, cartilage rebuilt with these supplements, and then the stem cell therapy, and then also, what you can do for inflammation for the knees.
I'm not quite sure of the question, but I think your question is saying, can the loss of cartilage with osteoarthritis rebuild itself through some type of nutritional treatments and things?
Yes, that's correct.
And I think the answer is yes, to a degree it can reduce the inflammation, and the cartilage is living tissue, and it can rebuild itself to a degree, except when the pathology gets so far advanced, when there's no base of cartilage left, or the base is so low that it loses its regenerative cells. So I think that there's advanced disease, like when there's bone against bone, it's very difficult for the cartilage to rebuild itself. So I think in the early stages of osteoarthritis, when there's minimal to moderate cartilage damage, the body can repair itself to a degree. But the more advanced it gets very difficult, and the body cannot. So, and that's something with similar diseases too. I've seen a lot of patients with after heart attacks have a degree of low ejection fraction and having not full heart function. But you know what? After 10 years of eating right, it seemed like a lot of the heart function came back. Their ejection fraction increased, and there was some hibernating myocardium in there that was not functioning, that the body was able to regenerate again. So there's always some degree of tissue that can be regenerated, and some degree maybe that's beyond help and cannot. So, so it has to be very individualized.
The stem cell therapy, have any thoughts on that, if it works? Or
I think that stem cell therapy, and you can comment after me, is one of the most powerful new horizons in medicine that's going to have legitimacy and tremendous application to help humanity. So I do think that it's one of the only areas that has the ability to regenerate tissue and take people who had some organ damage that can't be regenerated nutritionally and still allow them to get better outcomes. So I do think stem cell therapy in its early infancy, and its application is somewhat limited, but I can almost be sure in the next 10 years it's going to be a huge part of healthcare. Very expensive, and it may not be affordable for everybody, but we know it's most likely going to be very effective for people with serious illnesses to help them. My view of it, you have a person that, smoked cigarettes, ate junk food, destroyed their heart. Now we can give them stem cell therapy to build back their heart so they can eat more junk food. It's going to have, it should have limited use to be able to, make sure people live healthfully and don't utilize this very expensive therapy that may help people. Might overuse it, but it's still, there's a lot of applications where it is useful.
I just agree.
and then just the last part of that, like inflammation on the knees if they're swollen, just I guess proper diet, and then icing. Anything else that you would recommend?
Well, yes, all those things are helpful. I also recommend certain physical modalities that can help people with circulation and penetration, such as, a type of neuromuscular or myofascial massages where they seek out the tissues that might be a little harder than other tissues and use pressure on them to push down and allow blood to flow back into the area to stimulate healing. So there's a lot of physical modalities that can help people with that too.
Okay, thank you.
And I'll just add that obviously we've been promoting a very anti-inflammatory diet and a lot of greens and a lot of these anti-inflammatory berries and so forth. And one of the things that people often consume to try to reduce inflammation is turmeric, which contains curcumin, which is a very potent anti-inflammatory compound. And just kind of a little interesting bit about curcumin is it's very, very difficult to absorb. Okay, so you don't absorb much when you consume turmeric. But if you put a little black pepper on the food that you're putting the turmeric in, you will actually increase the absorption by an estimated 1,000 to 2,000 times. Okay, so it's really, and it's just something that's so simple, and just a good way to boost your ability to absorb this wonderful anti-inflammatory compound.
Talking about regeneration, I've heard that once the gut lining is damaged by gluten, for example, is that something that can be healed once again? I mean, is there hope?
I guess you all heard that. It was that if the gut line is damaged, can it regenerate itself and be healed again? And we said, of course it can. Yeah. There's certain parts of the body that are harder to regenerate than others. The gut is one of the parts of the body that can regenerate very better than most other parts of the body. The parts of the body that have trouble regenerating are mostly nerve tissue. It takes a long time to regenerate, and brain tissue is hard to regenerate. But the tissue, your liver regenerates, the other parts of the body regenerate much easier. And the lining of the gut is cells proliferate rapidly there and regrow themselves.
All right, that's great news. One more thing. Where's the line between like cravings and what your body needs?
I should say that that cravings do not direct you to what your body needs. That's a complete myth. The word craving automatically defines itself as being something perverted, because a healthy person doesn't have cravings. And you don't crave what you're deficient in, that's all. You crave things that you are, I should say, addicted to. And you crave things that are bad for you, not crave things that are good for you. And the other thing is that, that we can't, interview people. The idea that we can interview people and see what they like to eat, and that determines what diet is right for them. Or do you feel better when you eat meat? Or do you feel better when you eat more vegetables? Well, I feel better when I eat meat, so that must mean you're a meat type and you need to eat more meat. That's nonsense. As a matter of fact, because a person feels better when they smoke cigarettes doesn't mean they're a smoke cigarette type, and that's better for their health either. You know what I mean? Because when you do things that make you feel good are not good for you. Things that are good for you don't do anything to you. When you eat broccoli, you feel nothing. The thing has to be toxic to make you feel better. Do you follow what I'm giving you? Things that stimulate you aren't good for you. And things that stop detoxification usually are somewhat toxic, and moderate detoxification through nutrition doesn't give you any good feelings. So I'm kind of saying that you can't go by that.
Okay, thank you.
We're talking about, I'm 100% raw vegan, 2 years now. I was diagnosed with acoustic neuroma in my head. We haven't really discussed chewing. So I was going to go over, you guys.
I did discuss chewing today.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. Did you hear my lecture today?
I must have had a brain fart. I was here. Yes.
Must have been the acoustic neuroma.
All right. I hear it at one. But also fermented foods. Raw sauerkraut, kefir. I think you discussed that too. I was going to get her thoughts on that.
Sure.
Well, I think if you, again, look around the world and look at the studies that have been done on people consuming living food diets and their gut microbiome, there definitely is some link to the consumption of fermented foods and a better gut microbiome. And so I think it's a lovely addition to the diet. So I do try to include myself some sort of cultured or fermented foods, and what I often do, and I haven't gotten into fermenting vegetables myself yet, although I do purchase some raw fermented vegetables, but I do make all of my own fermented cheeses and things like that with nuts and seeds, and really enjoy them. I think it's a wonderful addition to the diet. And I know that you said today you don't feel it's necessary. If you have a good diet, you should, with plenty of fiber and prebiotics, And prebiotics are those components of the diet that help to feed the friendly bacteria. And that's of tremendous benefit as well. There are a lot of prebiotics in certain types of vegetables like Jerusalem artichokes and legumes and things like that. So doing a combination where you're consuming some prebiotics and some probiotics is, I think, a reasonable thing to do.
Yeah, I think it could be helpful for a person who has digestive problems and who have some history of not eating healthy, and they're not. But I personally don't think that they're a necessity for good health, and I don't think that you need to eat fermented foods to have excellent health, and I don't really generally recommend that. Unless a person's taken antibiotics or have some digestive disturbance or inflammatory bowel disease or irritable bowel disease, I do recommend things like probiotics and fermented foods if a person has some particular medical condition that might necessitate extra of that stuff. But for healthy people with healthy digestion, you make your own. And I don't think there's a need for that.
Thank you. Also, my sister has a 2-year-old that's just 2. She's constantly constipated. She just can't go. She drinks, she's a baby, so it's out of control what she's drinking or eating. So any thoughts on helping her with that area?
How old is the child?
She turned 2 yesterday.
Oh, so she's eating food.
Somewhat. She hardly eats, but yes. She's breastfeeding, but hardly eats.
Most of her calories come from the breast milk?
A lot. She's starting to transition into some foods, whatever she'll eat. She's picky.
Well, it's the same thing when you shipwrecked a child on a desert island, they eat what's available and they don't starve to death. And I think it's very important that if the child's a picky eater, the parents have the tendency to feed the child whatever they'll eat, and it ruins the nutritional quality of their diet because they're so worried the child's not going to eat enough food, and the fear that the child's not going to eat enough food makes the child be in control of what they're eating now, no longer eating healthy food, which leads to be a vicious cycle with constipation and other problems, instead of making it an environment of healthy food choices for the child.
What are your thoughts about giving her meat? Because I've been trying to say no, but I know that's a plant-based, but...
Well, we want to give her fibers that are going to help her bowel produce the right bacteria and produce a high bowel transit time. A meat-based diet or meat wouldn't be something that we wouldn't want to give her predominantly a diet focused on that because that's going to exacerbate the problem.
And a couple things I'd like to add. Number one is if most of her calories are coming from breast milk, I'm really concerned about where her iron is coming from. And if she's potentially anemic and if that may be affecting her appetite. And so that's something to think about. She needs a source of iron, an exogenous source of iron. She needed it a long time ago. So that's just something to think about. And secondly, is at 2 years of age, she should be eating a really good mix of solid foods. And sometimes when parents miss this sort of critical time for introducing various textures and so forth, and allowing children the tactile, being able to sort of play with food and consume it, it can be really hard for them to accept textures. And so it can be challenging, but they need to be introducing her to just about everything and lots of high fiber foods. Meat would provide the iron if she's low in iron, but there are other wonderful sources of iron that are much more healthful and would actually provide the fiber, and she needs enough fluids as well. But, children, I just so agree with what Dr. Fuhrman said about, if children are on a desert island. I remember when my kids were little, my kids are 30 and 27 now, but when they were little, they were raised on healthy foods, and we didn't introduce some of the not so healthy things. And I can remember my daughter at 9 years of age coming upstairs, getting ready for bed, and she said, "Mom, what could I have for a bedtime snack?" And she looked in the fridge and she saw what was in the fridge, and she said, "Boy, there's a head of spinach. Can I have the spinach?" And I said, "Well, sure." So she got out and she cooked the spinach with garlic and took out a wedge of lemon and sat down at the table, and she's squeezing the lemon on the spinach as my 6-year-old son is walking up the stairs. And he looks at her and he goes, "Is that spinach?" And she says, "Yes, it's spinach." And he said, "Well, is there any more?" And she said, "Well, no, I just ate the last batch." And he just burst into tears. And the point is what you introduce your kids to, what you get them excited about. If you're growing gardens, they love vegetables, they love fruits. And as parents, that attitude, we bear some responsibility for that. And I can remember the first potluck my 2-year-old son went to. It was at a toy lending library, and there was all these platters of foods, and he thought he got to pick a platter and bring it back, and there were bowls of chips and sandwiches and all kinds of stuff, and he made a beeline for the vegetable tray and carried it back to our table, the whole thing. I had to explain to him that he didn't get the whole thing. But anyway, and I just, we really need to say we have to set boundaries as parents. And that's all there is to it. And yet, I guess from a vegetarian perspective, I took the easy way out in one sense. I told my children at home we eat plant foods, we're vegetarian. When you go to friends' homes or when you're with other people, you'll have some choices to make in your life. And the choice of whether or not you eat meat or dairy or whatever it is completely up to you. It's not up to me when you're out with friends. You have to make that choice. And I think that's also a very reasonable thing to do. We can set boundaries in our homes, and to me, we have a responsibility as parents to offer the food. The child has the responsibility of, how much food they're going to eat and so forth. But if all we offer is healthy foods, it's all good.
Thank you.
See, I used to fight a lot with my children about this. I'd say to them, "Sean, you better not eat all that kale because I need it for my strength and my power and my job. And if you eat it all, you're going to get stronger than me, and I can't have you be stronger than me." So he'd come over and give me a shove, and I'd backflip over the couch, and I'd say, "Get those green vegetables away from that kid. I can't have him getting that strong." He'd wake up in the morning and go, "Where's the broccoli, Dad?" "It's not for you." So that's my fight with my kid. But I know with many years of contemplation and study and with thought, I finally figured out, because I used to enjoy watching Gilligan's Island, and I finally figured out lots of contemplation that Skipper never really lived on that island.
I keep reading that we're frugivores. Is that fruits? And are we herbivores or omnivores? Or I keep seeing on the internet we're frugivores, which to me means fruit eaters. So I tended to go a lot more fruits as my diet progressed. Being raw vegan, I was a lot of vegetables, salads, and then I ended up more fruits.
Well, personally, I think that's one of the problems with the raw food diet, is that people who are raw eat too much fruit, and that it's hard to eat enough vegetables when they eat everything raw. And I see a lot of, over the years, I've seen people who were raw foodists and ate so much fruit lose their hair, lose their nails, more prone to fungal infections, more prone to infections, pneumonia, and just have poor immune system function and not do very well. Some people can thrive on it. We're all a little bit different, but I think there's the probability is that a person with a heavy fruit diet is increasing the probability of not thriving as well had they had a more varied diet and less fruit. And I like a lot of fruit. I just don't want a person to eat mostly fruit, eat so much fruit in their diet. I remember one guy, I've been involved with the Natural Hygiene or American Health Association, many years ago when I was a teenager. And so some of these people are so into into nutrition and so against medical care that they would get a pneumonia and not want to take an antibiotic or be so afraid of any kind of medical care. And I've seen people refuse medical care and die, And, I had a person who was mostly a raw food, fruitarian, develop pneumonia. I saw a lot of people who were fruitarians get too thin, facial atrophy, dental problems, fungal and skin infections, toenail infections, and get pneumonia and then refuse antibiotics and die. So I'm not saying that, people can't thrive on it, but I'd be cautious and try to eat more vegetable, have a more well-rounded diet, not living almost 90% on fruit.
It would be like 80% on vegetables, 20% fruit, or 90% vegetable, 10% fruit?
I'm not that rigid. There's a lot of various percentages that are probably good for a lot of different people, and I don't think it has to be that rigid. I'm just saying that I would probably say as long as the majority of calories in your diet, I wouldn't recommend the majority of calories in your diet come from fruit, but I think probably for a lot of people, half might be okay if they ate all the other things enough of, but a lot of these people are eating a diet where they're way above half of their calories come from fruit. I think that's the problem.
I do tomatoes, cucumber, and consider them fruits just because they have seeds. So they don't seem like they're that sweet to me. But
No,
is that
they're
considered
not.
a vegetable? What's that?
I mean, we eat them as vegetables, and they're much
Gotcha.
lower in sugar.
I thought they were
than,
fruit, so
yeah,
that's
they're
my-
technically fruit botanically, but they are much lower in sugar for
I
sure.
have a lot of low sugar
Yeah.
fruits. Then.
I
Yeah.
don't care about the name or what you call it. We just
Yeah.
don't want you to have an overbalance of sugar in your diet.
I go back and forth.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I'll add that what I've seen sometimes when people are eating a very high fruit diet is they tend to have a little tougher time getting enough protein and some of the trace minerals like iron and zinc, which are really, really important. So, and sometimes they'll get a little bit thin-skinned and they will become amenorrheic, they won't menstruate, and so there'll be issues like that. So just a little bit of caution there. I personally eat a fair bit of fruit. I love fruit. My mom used to say when I was a kid, if she would buy a basket of peaches, they'd be gone in a day. I've always been a fruit lover, but I do think it's important, as Dr. Fuhrman said, to have that balance where you're getting a wide variety of foods, so you get a wide variety of phytochemicals. And I want to just go back, I'll just go back a little bit to what, are we omnivores, herbivores? What are as human beings? We're omnivores. We'll eat whatever we can get to survive. However, that doesn't mean it's necessarily, we thrive best eating omnivorous. I think we thrive best on a very strong or plant-based diet. And if you look at nutritional anthropology, what we see is back in sort of the Paleolithic era, people in different parts of the world consumed somewhere between 1/3 and 2/3 plants and 1/3 and 2/3 animal products. And what's really interesting is if you look at the estimates of nutrition or vitamin and mineral and protein and so forth intake, what's really interesting is at the very lowest end of plant intake, so the people that ate 2/3 meat and 1/3 plants, their estimated fiber intake was 70 grams a day. The people at the upper end of the plant intake, 2/3 plants and 1/3 animals, the estimated fiber intake was at least 150 grams a day. Now this has got to tell us something, because the average vegan is getting about 40 to 60 grams or maybe 70 grams of fiber a day. So these people were eating a truckload of plants to get that much. They were consuming on average 3,000 calories a day. But if you look at their vitamin C intakes, their potassium intakes, the nutrients that are really concentrated in plants, they were eating way more than even the average vegan. So this is very, very interesting. And the other thing we know is that cultivated plants have been bred to be sweeter, to be lower in fiber, to be more palatable than these wild plants that our ancestors were eating. But people that are eating a so-called Paleolithic diet today, I actually analyzed their menus. I analyzed 3 days of menus from one of the top paleo websites and compared it to true Paleolithic intakes. And I did the same with a vegan diet and compared that to true Paleolithic intakes. The vegan diet was way closer than what people are calling paleo today. They're nowhere close to what a Paleolithic diet really was.
What are your thoughts about healing eczema and hypothyroid in a natural way without resorting to drugs? Eczema, and the other one was hypothyroid. So you can start with eczema.
Well, the first question I think was eczema was like
Eczema.
a skin rash, which is kind of like a combination of factors. It might be have to affect with nutritional deficiencies. It could be zinc, fatty acid, but it could also be allergies, things you're sensitive to. And we have to, so with people's diets, we want to have a framework of a healthy diet, but sometimes we have to do elimination diets and testing to see if there's any sensitivity or allergies to food. And we talked about that yesterday on the panel, I think it was. We mentioned that allergies and eczema and these diseases are more prevalent today than they used to be years ago. And it's our early in life exposure and our exposure to antibiotics and not breastfeeding and not eating natural foods and having an ultra clean environment and being exposed to. There's a lot of causes. Taking vitamin pills, taking folic acid instead of eating green vegetables when we're pregnant. The whole thing about folic acid is kind of insane anyway. It's that folic acid increases the child's risk of allergies and infections. It increases the risk of actually, and I'm claiming that this folic acid nonsense increases risk of childhood cancer. Because here's my reasoning, okay? That folic acid is synthetic. It's not what we get in food. Food gives us folate. Folic acid has to be converted into folate, but folic acid itself penetrates cells more readily and can drive cell proliferation. It's definitely linked in multiple studies now to breast cancer and prostate cancer. And so we're giving women during their pregnancy a drug, so to speak, so it can help not have neural tube defects, instead of telling women they need to get folate from eating green vegetables. So now that we got a drug solution, the folic acid, for women, they don't have to be concerned about eating green vegetables. They can just take the pill. They can still go to McDonald's when they're going to have a baby and just take a pill thinking they're okay. Now, it doesn't work because for a lot of reasons. Number one, the link between, there's other things in green vegetables besides folate that's linked to healthy children, and the lack of green vegetables in the diet before pregnancy and through pregnancy are linked to high rates of childhood brain tumors and childhood cancers and things like that. So by putting the woman on folic acid, you're increasing the other problems, and it doesn't even work that well to prevent neural tube defects either, because neural tube defects means you have to have adequate folate before you got pregnant, because the neural tube is formed in the first 20 to 35 days of pregnancy, and mostly women don't even know they're pregnant. The time they know they're pregnant, to start taking folic acid, it's too late anyway. So now they're taking folic acid. It's too late to prevent neural tube defects. They're taking it too late, but it's going to push their risk of breast cancer up high because they're taking folic acid, and make them not pay attention to green vegetable consumption. So there's a lot of factors. Well, I guess I went in a different direction than you expected me to with the question, but it just triggered off a thought in my mind that we do so much wrong, and our health is determined by not just by we eat, but what our parents eat before we're born. And you have when you are 2 years old, you have all the eggs for your children in your body, and what you eat all through your childhood affects the health of your children. So your eggs that are of your children are formed when you were in your mother's womb, when you were forming your nails and you were forming those eggs. So those eggs are a year older than you are, or almost a year, 8 months older than you are, approximately, your eggs of your children. And you affect the health of your children by the diet you eat. And you can affect their risk of allergies, and their risk of autoimmune conditions, and the risk of even the risk of diabetes can be affected by what you ate before you even conceived the child, before you know what I mean? So but nevertheless, when those problems happen, we do all we can to optimize nutritional input, make sure that no deficiencies are present, and then sometimes see what type of dietary modifications, sometimes with or without testing, can be made to get this person to be as healthy as possible.
The other one was hypothyroid. So is iodine important in that?
The question about hypothyroidism and iodine, there are some rare individual people, there are some people who can benefit, who have hypothyroidism who benefit from taking more iodine, some people, but that's relatively rare. Most people with hypothyroidism do not benefit from more iodine because their diet, it's not caused by iodine deficiency, it's caused by an autoimmune disease attack on the thyroid gland. So you develop immune system that destroy the cells in the thyroid gland that make thyroid hormone. And that attack is influenced by exposure to things that are toxic in our environment. It could be, we don't know all the toxins that sensitize the thyroid to the attack. It could be plastic chemicals, it could be petrochemicals, it could be dioxins, it could be PCBs lying in cans and plastic goods. And women seem to be more sensitive to those toxins than men are. So, And mostly, by the time you've had it for years, the time you've had developing it when you're older, it's usually very difficult to reverse it. So it's not a disease we see that reverses, consistently, like diabetes reverses consistently. Heart disease reverses consistently. Liver diseases reverse consistently. But thyroid disease does not reverse consistently. I have seen some cases that had autoimmune Hashimoto's or thyroiditis that were young that were able to reverse it themselves, but I don't see a lot of people who develop it later in life or who have it for years and years be able to get rid of it. Did you want to comment on that?
Go ahead.
Okay.
What is the best way to detect whether you have parasites in the body? There's like so many tests out there. Which one would you recommend for detecting parasites?
The one you lie down and you spin crystals over your... Well, the best tests are the labs that do the best type of stool analysis, where they do a very comprehensive stool analysis, including microscopy. So it's having a careful, not just to send it to a lab and they do an O&P, but actually have the lab do a comprehensive analysis with careful microscopy and a lab that's experienced in looking for those type of things. But still, that's very much, how should I say it? It's exaggerated. The amount of people that have it are relatively rare, and some of those parasites like Blastocystis hominis and those other parasites that you see in your stool don't affect healthy people. When your health is good enough, they are inconsequential. So I think that there's a lot of overemphasis on that, and it's relatively rare that you have real parasites. But it's a legitimate problem in various parts of the world, not so much in this country. You know, it can be it can be a very serious condition if you get something like that, especially traveling in another country.
Mm-hmm. Is it important to have enzymes with every meal, like throughout your life? Because some people say, is it important to consume enzymes with every meal?
Enzymes with every meal.
Supplemental enzymes, yes.
No, I don't think it's important to consume enzymes at all. Why would you think your body can't make enough enzymes? I mean, if you're eating a diet with 90% of your calories from meat, then you have overwhelmed the body's capacity to secrete digestive enzymes, and you're putting your body under stress. So I could see all that fat and all that cheese and all that bacon and all that grease and may require some extra enzymes to help you, and you're going to get a lot of indigestion and reflux and constipation and hemorrhoids and diverticulosis, and maybe enzymes help those people, but I can't see living within the capacity of the human body and eating and digesting and chewing, and why would you need any digestive enzymes at all?
But as we grow older, aren't we depleted of enzymes? Don't we need to take over a certain age, like maybe 50 years or 60 years? What are your thoughts on that? That's what is...
How old do you think I am?
I have no idea.
Oh, I'm 85 now. But anyway, no, I think that if you live a healthy life, your body shouldn't deteriorate like that. There might be some rare instances, and actually you could test for that if you thought that was the case, but there might be, and I've done plenty of tests on people, and it's almost never the case that people develop true enzyme deficiencies with aging. So that's not true, and certainly I consider people in their 60s relatively young as far as their health is concerned. Maybe not on a standard American diet, but you should be able to have all the capacity of production in your body. And don't forget, your body makes double the kidney function it needs. Maybe quadruple the kidney function it needs. It has 4 times the lung function it needs. You can survive with a lung and still run, still be physical and play games and stuff. And your heart function is way over capacity for what we need, and our digestive capacity and enzyme capacity is way over what we need, especially when we eat healthfully. There's no reason why you would need to think that your body can't supply what it needs on the food we eat, especially when we eat a healthy diet.
Thank you. I like your answer.
And I'll just add one thing, because I think this is a theory that was proposed by, I think it was Edward Howell in a book way back in the 1930s or something. And I actually posed that very question to 2 of the leading enzyme researchers in the world, and one from the UK and one from the US. And both said there's absolutely no scientific evidence whatsoever to support that theory, and that humans, there are some instances where people, with certain diseases may not be able to produce sufficient enzymes, but in healthy individuals, there's no problem, for us to produce sufficient enzymes to digest the food we eat.
Thank you.
What do you think about enemas and colonics?
That's a good question. Enemas and colonics. We haven't talked about that yet. Okay. We have another question? But, I think that there can be unusual circumstances where a person can be obstructed, where they might need to have something to help remove that obstruction, but I think that generally speaking, it's an intervention that has risks, and a person eating healthfully wouldn't require that. And the idea that you have built up cakes of material on the wall of your colon that need special treatments like enemas and colonics to remove is simply not true. There's no such buildup of material on the walls of people's colons. And obviously, that there's a specialist in medical profession called a gastroenterologist, with one of which the doctor was here today and yesterday, who, and I myself as a family physician scope people and look in people's rectums. And there's no, in other words, there's risks, and there's no need to do that when you eat a healthy diet. The healthy foods and the raw foods are naturally keep yourself clean. There's no reason to do anything like that. Yes.
Yes, a friend of mine has Lyme. Do you have any recommendations for Lyme disease?
Yes, I think that that there's a lot of, how should I say this, confusion about Lyme disease, and that Lyme disease, if you truly have Lyme disease, and the problem is there are labs that diagnose people falsely with Lyme disease, and there are a lot of doctors who diagnose people with Lyme disease who don't have Lyme disease. And then they give them antibiotics for years and years or continually as a treatment for chronic Lyme disease, and the person becomes severely addicted to antibiotics because when they try to stop the antibiotics, they feel ill, and they think it's the Lyme disease reactivating because when they try to stop the antibiotics, they're actually it's just like an addiction, and the doctor turned them into an antibiotic addict. And they use these labs that almost every test you send them come back positive, that improperly overdiagnosed Lyme disease as the criteria to ascertain that. And a lot of people, so two things. Number one, if you truly have Lyme disease, then it should be treated with an antibiotic, because the spirochete, it needs to be killed. If it's not killed, it could cause blindness and brain damage, and it can really destroy a person's health. If the spirochete is killed adequately with antibiotics, then you still have dead spirochetes in your body. And you're not necessarily all better, but you have to get well slowly, and through good nutrition and good health. And even if you have symptoms then, you don't have to take antibiotics for the rest of your life or for long periods of time, because then the person develops sickness due to the antibiotics, and that they attribute to Lyme disease. And I live in a Lyme endemic area, and I had Lyme disease. I've never taken an antibiotic in my life, I can't even remember, except for I think last year when I thought I scraped my knee and a little scab on my knee, and I didn't even know it was a tick. And then I developed this big red thing on my knee, and I thought it was like a cellulitis infection. And I realized, no, this is Lyme disease. How did I get? And I realized that scab on my knee was a tick that had a little scab over it, and I couldn't tell it was a tick. Because I'm always watching my body frantically for looking for ticks, because I'm working in the garden, I'm running in the woods, I'm doing, so in any case, I did have to take an antibiotic for Lyme disease, but I never had any problem with it. After 2 weeks of doing that, it was gone, and I was, But so in any way, Lyme disease should be treated appropriately, and I think you have to be very careful about the diagnosis of chronic Lyme with a person who had been treated adequately with an antibiotic, because I think most of those diagnoses are dangerous for the person and harmful to the long-term health to be on chronic use of antibiotics. You could say something.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
What can you do about fungus that you have, like in a fingernail or toenail, for years? And I've been told you have to take some kind of medication, which I've never done.
Your question is about fungal infections, and there are medications that you can take orally that are antifungal medications, but like you said, there's a kind of hesitancy to do that because you're treating your whole body with an antifungal and it could affect your liver, and those are quite, potentially risky drugs. I wouldn't do that. And so the answer, so what else could you do? Yes, you can use topical medication that are antifungal liquids on the nail and the toenail. And let me finish this because this is a little more complicated. And you can even use household bleach, which works as an antifungal, a drop of household bleach on the nail. But here's the thing. It doesn't work unless you grind away the nail because there's too much, it can't penetrate deep enough usually to kill all the fungus so it grows back. So what you do is you buy one of those Dremel drills with a little diamond bit, and you carefully drill away at your nail, let's say your toenail, your thick toenail, and it won't hurt until you get it down to like a paper thin, and then when you get to that edge, it'll flake off, and then when there's almost no nail there, then you can put the antifungal medication, the liquid on it, or a drop of bleach on it, or some kind of, or tea tree oil, or something that has antifungal effects, and then it'll work, doing it a drop every day or twice a day for a period of 2 months. Then it'll work, and your new nail will grow out, because you removed most of the bad nail and most of the fungus before you use the treatment. Did you follow me?
2 months, though? Is that all?
2 months of the drops, yeah, but it's good to use the drops where the nail grows back in and the toenail grows slower than obviously a fingernail does, but you probably should use it till the nail is kind of almost, mostly grown in, looking normal again, and then you can stop the drops.
Because with the fungus, you can just take the nail, it just is easily.
In your case, it's the fungus is so bad, the nail's coming right off practically.
There
must be a fungus among us.
Yeah, I think so. But you can almost take a lot of it off if you
Then take the whole thing off.
Not the whole thing, but I mean, you can take most of it off.
I've got pliers up in my room.
I've taken it off, and it grows, it does grow back, but you got to.
Well, then you got to put, the point is you got to put the tea tree oil, the bleach, or the treatment on the cuticle, on the base of the nail where the thing was pulled out, and cover the whole nail bed, but put it in the base and let it sit there for a minute. And keep treating that every single day.
Okay, I've tried the bleach and that, but I probably haven't done it long enough. I start by doing the topical stuff, but I don't continue. I don't.
You got to be rigorous and keep doing it for a long time. Yes.
Okay. So, Dr. Fuhrman, any final closing thoughts you want to leave us with?
Just that it was a pleasure being here and speaking to all of you this week, and I really enjoyed meeting some of you individually, and I hope that you benefited from this. It was, I think, a wonderful week, and I hope you benefit from me being here, and hope to keep in touch and hear from you in the future, and hope you all have a happy and healthy life moving forward and take care of your health. Thank you.